especially with the legalization of marijuana coming. You know, people think, oh, good, it's legal. I can have my guns and my marijuana and everything else. And I don't really like to answer those questions because they're legal questions. So what I'd like to do is bring on one of our VCDL attorneys, which is Gilbert Ambler. Welcome to the show, Gilbert. Thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on.
So do you want to first kind of go over what's going on with what you can with the lawsuit without giving away any secrets, and then just talk about the whole marijuana thing a little bit?
Sure. I think with regard to the lawsuit, without getting too far into the weeds with our strategy right now and what we're looking to see happen, I think what I can tell you is that the Commonwealth has filed preliminary answers. And having reviewed their preliminary answers, we still feel very, very strong about our chances in this. We feel good about where we are. And so I guess I would just say with respect to that, stay tuned. And as we have updates, we'll absolutely get that word out and make sure everyone's aware of those updates. For your other question, which is involving marijuana and firearms owners, this is a crystal clear subject under federal law. Does not matter what the state says. Under federal law, if you use marijuana, if you're a marijuana user, it is unlawful for you to possess both firearms and ammunition. And that is true irrespective of whether the state has legalized marijuana. It's true if you live in a state that gives out medical marijuana cards. None of that matters. And in fact, when you go to purchase a firearm from a gun store, you're going to fill out a 4473. You're going to fill out a federal form. And right on that form, there's an included question that asks you, are you an unlawful user or addicted to a controlled substance? And it goes on to explain, when you read it carefully, and you should always read those forms carefully, it goes on to explain that a controlled substance includes marijuana. And so what Virginia has done here is Virginia, by legalizing marijuana, they've given people a sense of ease that people will be eligible to possess both firearms and marijuana because all of a sudden the state says it's okay, right? And that is absolutely not true. What they're doing is they're setting gun owners up. I've got a good friend who's an attorney up in New Jersey, a guy named Evan Knappen, who's a very, very high-profile firearms attorney in New Jersey. And Evan always says you can have fun smoke or you can have gun smoke. You can't have both. And that is very, very true.
I tell people I've always thought this was like a backdoor to gun control, and they're like, "No, this has nothing to do with it." I'm like, "You are incorrect. In fact, I'm so sure you're incorrect. I'm going to get our attorney to come on live and tell us so."
Sure. Now, the other thing I do want to make clear to people, and Pat and I were actually discussing this recently, is if you used marijuana in the past, that does not automatically mean that you're precluded from firearms ownership forever, okay? It's not a permanent gun ban because you one time smoked marijuana back in high school. And so I also don't want to scare people that way. The ATF has said that arrests within a year or evidence of possession of marijuana within a year of possession of firearms or ammunition could be used to support prosecution. Here in the Fourth Circuit, we have some cases that stand for the proposition that to actually convict you, they have to show a pattern and recency of use. Now, one way they could show a pattern and recency of use is if they pull you over and they smell marijuana smoke in the car, and you do in fact have marijuana in the car, and you also have a firearm. Now we're talking about a federal crime, okay? And that's a federal crime that they can likely prove in that scenario. So I know there's lots of people out there very, very excited to see marijuana being legalized. But keep in mind, if you are a gun owner, it is still off limits for you.
And I don't really know a lot about the law, but Jason King said ABC scans your ID, and I guarantee they'll put you on the no-buy list. Is ABC got, what do they have to do? I don't know the answer to this. I haven't looked at it. Is ABC going to be part of this?
Frankly, I would have to do more research because I'm a firearms attorney, not a marijuana attorney.
Yeah, I don't know.
And so I could look into it. I suspect that a lot of the systems probably will not communicate that much. And what I mean by this is Up the road, I practice in Pennsylvania. I'm licensed to practice in Pennsylvania as well. Up the road in Pennsylvania, they've had medical marijuana for a while now. And my advice to those using medical marijuana in Pennsylvania is they still can't possess firearms. And a lot of times people say, well, what do you mean? They make admissions, you know, they say, well, I've had my medical card. You're telling me that it's unlawful for me to go buy a gun right now? And I say, absolutely it would be. And they say, well, how would they know? And that's a good question. Practically speaking, they probably wouldn't know. Legally speaking, it's absolutely a problem. And who wants to roll the dice on a federal felony? Because that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about rolling the dice on a federal felony if you're in possession of marijuana and firearms.
Well, I think the point here is that even if your background check goes through, because we all know that with government agencies, the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. Sometimes the left hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing, but you can never count on that. But the point is that if you, say, get pulled over and you have your medical marijuana card on you and you have your gun on you and they search you and or your vehicle, then you are having a big problem. You're going to have a very bad day.
Yeah, and I'm going to go a step further, and we'll see how this all shakes out in the courts. But my belief is that they are absolutely still going to be able to use the smell of marijuana to search a vehicle in Virginia, okay? Because although the state has legalized it, and that is true, police officers, generally speaking, have the ability, and we know this from various immigration laws and challenges to immigration laws across the country, state and local law enforcement have the ability to arrest for violation of federal law. And so it really doesn't matter what Virginia says. That gives them a reason to search a vehicle. And as I said, subject to courts coming up with a different rule on this in Virginia, I believe state and local law enforcement are going to be able to use the smell of marijuana, although the state has legalized it, as a reason to search. And then if they come up with that firearm, in addition to the marijuana, now we have very serious problems.
And so if a person were taking medical marijuana, if they stop taking it for at least a year, then they should be okay.
Yeah, and again, this is like many things that the ATF has done. There's no statute saying that, right? It's not written down into, we're not going to be able to pull a federal statute and say, oh, after a year. This is the ATF's interpretation. And so I would tell you that on a pure legal basis, I think there is a solid argument that even the next day after you give it up, you're no longer an unlawful user, okay? You were a user, you're no longer an unlawful user. That's a legal argument, however, and no one wants to be the test case on this stuff. And so what the ATF has said, and the ATF has put people on notice, is the ATF has said, we think that that line is not the next day. We think it's a whole year. And so they're telling you they're going to prosecute you if it's within a year. And so I think the smart advice for anyone out there who's in that position is wait a year.
Or better, if you can, just stay away from it if you can. As a gun.
And I'm speaking specifically to people who may have already, possibly even unknowingly, given up some firearms rights and now want to know what they can do to get those rights back.
Yeah. Well, we certainly don't want anybody to get in trouble. That's for sure. Certainly not with a federal felony.
Jason is asking about what is when the ABC scans your driver's license when you buy liquor. That's just a computer program that tells the cash register whether you're old enough to buy the liquor or not.
Of course, that could change. You're muted, Ed.
They send people into the store that are 20 years old with beards that normally would look well enough, old enough, and then they charge them. So they're like, okay, we're IDing everybody, and to prove that they ID'd them, they scan it.
And I'm seeing a question over on the side saying, so they can lie that they smell marijuana and search people's cars. And as a very practical matter, can they? Of course they can. I mean, this is a very fact. This is the type of thing a defense attorney challenges, and we do regularly challenge. And 99.9% of law enforcement officers out there are good law enforcement officers who are not going to act improperly in that manner. There are that very, very small percentage who will use and abuse the powers that they have. And yes, it's a possibility. So that's a possibility for you tomorrow. Even if you've never, ever used marijuana.
If people like what you have to say and they get jacked up or in trouble or whatever, and they want to actually either through US Law Shield or through Ambler Law offices, how do they reach you, Gilbert?
Yeah. So certainly if they have legal problems or legal questions, one of the most affordable ways to become a U.S. Law Shield member, because that way they'd be U.S. Law Shield will pay for my time. Alternatively, they can absolutely reach out to my office, amblerlawoffices.com. You can also give me a call, which is 540-550-4236.
Very good.
Thank you for having me on.
Thanks. You want to hang for just like 2 or 3 minutes and see if any questions roll in, because there's a little bit of a delay.
I will do so.
If that doesn't happen, then we will drop you like a hot potato.
Sounds good. Good to see you all.
Okay. Yeah, there was also a question about the rifle arm braces and stuff. Well, that's the comment period is running right now. So where this will go, we don't know. At the end of hopefully, if they get a lot of comments, the BATFE, better known as BATFE, will have to look at all those various comments, which hopefully there's it'd be great to have 1 million of them. That would take up some time. Go through and process all that, and then they can take it from there, whether they drop it like a hot potato, like Gilbert there, or whether they decide to plow forward with it, or they modify what they're doing and go forward with that. We won't know for probably a couple of months yet. I think it's like a 90-day comment period. So we'll see where that goes. I have been looking at experimenting on my side. I took one of my AR pistols that had a brace on it, and I took it off. And I purchased a couple things. Number one, I purchased a tube that at the very end has a nice soft padded area that you could rest against your cheek. And I put on the bottom of the gun, on the part that I'm trying to remember what the part's called now, that goes by the hand guard that holds in the detent pin for the rear disassembly lever. Not a lever, but a pin. Anyhow, I forget what that's called, but you can buy one of those and replace what you've got on there, and it allows you to do a quick detach sling connector. And my particular setup has a quick detach on the handguard as well. And I wasn't sure how that would work. I mean, was it going to be like really, uncomfortable or hard to deal with? And I tried the 1 point, and I just didn't like the 1 point. The gun just hangs down and flops around. There's just no way to do it. But a 2 point, believe it or not, actually worked pretty well. In fact, and with the cheek weld, which you don't really need, but with the sling, with the 2 point sling, you can push that gun out, the pistol, and the sling, really, you put tension on that sling while you're holding that pistol straight out, and it's very steady to do that. So this weekend, I will be going to the range to give all this a try to see how that actually works. I'm hoping we don't lose the case, but I'm looking at options anyhow to give people, if at the end of the day, this goes south. And I have a feeling it's going to work very well. The cheek weld alone seemed very nice, but you want padding, and you don't want the padding that goes all the way to the frame of the gun. You just want it a short part for your cheek. Otherwise, the charging handle can get kind of caught up in the foam. But I'll put more information out once I've played with this later on, if it turns out that we're going to have a problem with these things.
So were you talking about an end plate with a QD hole in it?
Yes, an end plate. That's the part. Yeah, that is right there where the tube, the recoil tube meets the
It goes under your castle nut.
Goes under the castle nut, and that one's got a QD disconnect.
And the QD.
Sorry to interrupt. I don't see any more questions for Gilbert, and he's like $1 million a minute and very busy, so I want to release him.
See y'all.
Thanks, Gilbert.
Thanks, Gilbert.